Welcome everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Implementing Best-in-Class Management Systems with AS9100D. Let's go right to the agenda. As I pass this slide, just want to mention to you that we do many global implementations. We have helped many large organizations since about 1995 globally, and it is something we're quite proud of, having most of our training actually in about 22 different languages. All right. So here is what we said we would talk to you about. What can we say? Well, the aerospace industry is going through a major change. I'll try to introduce what that major change is, when I start the webinar. And what we are trying to do then with management systems is try to be the best we can under the current circumstances so our companies can survive and thrive. So this is the agenda for today. The aerospace industry business needs, and then what we'll do is cover about 8 different strategies that we have that we think are really important that our AS9100 management systems implement. Folks, I really don't care whether it's AS9100, whether it's ISO 9001. It's not the standard that counts. What counts is what we have done with our business processes to help our companies really improve. Let there be no doubt where Omnex and I stand in terms of different management systems. It's not the requirements that count, it's how we implement them. All right, so what is going on in the aerospace in terms of management systems? Really, if you look at it, here's a slide from Boeing talking about the number of airplanes. This is just commercial. We haven't even looked at the defense market. If we just look at commercial, we're going from 20,000 airplanes sold a year all the way to 45,240. That's just, and combined with the, retained and replaced, 45,240. So more than a double an increase in the number of airplanes sold. And what are we talking about? Money in trillions of dollars. So we know there's a huge opportunity. Globally, more people are traveling in airplanes. We see the emerging markets come on board. So these markets in Asia and existing markets in North America and some really, entrepreneurial and well-run airlines in the Middle East. I don't know if you all know about the Emirates. 3 different countries, Bahrain and the Emirates, and then we have Abu Dhabi, other than Dubai, all having very good airlines with great interests, including, so that's why you see a 22% in the Middle East. All this is going to, for those of you listening today, it's going to be a great bonanza. Well, at the same time, Boeing and Airbus, the 2 big, large, aerospace OEMs, are going to face a lot more competition, not only from the Bombardiers and from Brazil, but Embraer, but also from China and Russia. I don't know if you recently saw, a tie-in between the 2, but you do know China has great ambitions in terms of aerospace. So what does this all mean? Yes, the pot is very big, very lucrative, At the same time, intense competition. Added to this is the statistics, the key statistics of on-time delivery and quality. Just tells you, when I look at this, it reminds me of, we work in 5 major markets. It reminds me of the automotive industry in the 1980s. This number I actually took from an OEM that we worked with, and but this is a 10-year-old number. It would be really interesting to see how much improvement has happened in the last 10 years. This is when we really worked with a whole plane coming out and all the suppliers of the work packages. And so, of course, so many of you listening today, we have either trained you or we have done implementations with you. And I'll just say this, a couple of comments. What are the opportunities? What I said earlier, the aerospace industry will more than double between 2015 and 2035. Number 2, the aerospace industry is a little different from other industries. There are large suppliers who are almost as big as the OEMs. Maybe some of them are even bigger than the OEMs that they supply. So these large tier 1s and the OEMs will reduce supply bases. The OEMs, as I saw, had already sort of reduced it and had arrangements with the large tier 1s. The large tier 1s have a real job at hand. There are too many suppliers for these large tier 1s. And we're doing implementations now in the supply basis of these large tier 1s, and I can tell you these suppliers need a lot of improvement, a lot of capability in their organizations. So let me just go on with my third point. The good suppliers will grow tremendously. This is what we saw in other troubled industries where the customer went with reliable, good, capable suppliers and took business away from the poor suppliers. And so it's a great opportunity for what we're going to be talking about, the subject of today. Well, if that wasn't enough, major technological advancement, along with our reliance on fossil fuel, the efficiency of airplanes, technology improvements in the airplanes in terms of, along with the connected aircraft, is going to make major changes happen in the OEMs, the tier 1s, and then, of course, the suppliers. And, this presentation, to a small degree, addresses this connected aircraft. But of course, the organizations we're talking about are just in the beginning of that thinking process. So what do we recommend? Folks, looking at the audience I have today, where it's a mixture of large tier 1s and smaller suppliers, it's very difficult for me to have a uniform set of suggestions. Suffice it to say, these are what we thought are common requirements for the aerospace industry. Working with any one of you, this will be tweaked to your situation. So here are the 8: the process, approach, and documentation. Maybe you've all grown tired of me talking about this, but this is the key. And we'll talk about, tied to this is the documentation. What should we do on that documentation? Is it more documentation we need or less documentation we need? Second, something I really haven't talked about, very near and dear. I've just come off meetings with a large tier 1. And as I came off those meetings and reflecting on all the suppliers of this tier 1 that we have visited, it is really important. Bullet number 2 becomes really important. This is something we did for Ford Motor Company in the 1990s. This needs to happen in the aerospace industry for the next level of improvement. And it's really something aimed at senior management, bullet number 2. Then we'll talk to you about AS9145. Thinking about the connected car and the importance of software, we'll talk to you about AS9115. Thinking about on-time delivery, we'll talk to you about lean. Discipline problem solving, I'll tell you why we only pick discipline problem solving and not Six Sigma. We have nothing against Six Sigma, but we don't believe you need to have, in our experience, because we have done this to entire industries, I think just the good quality management system, good APQP PPAP, along with the business operating system of the discipline management and discipline problem solving will do the trick to bring you somewhere below 100 ppm, if not 60 ppm. And integrated management systems and web-based, web-enabled e-processes. All right, so let's talk then about the very first topic at hand, the business processes. So look at the sub-bullets here: alignment with strategy, enterprise processes, integration and standardization, which I'll talk to you about later. So before I move forward, let's clearly understand what this documentation is all about. The documentation in our businesses is really to fulfill the objectives of the organization and the mission, vision, values, and policies of the organization that the objectives point to. So let there be no doubt in our minds how the current situation of each of you is what dictates how you shape your processes. Folks, that's why it's really good to have interested party expectations and context come into the picture in terms of how we do planning and how we design our processes. More on that later, but let me start out by saying processes are there to help us meet the objectives. It's not only just our view, it is indeed the definition of a management system. Now, the next slide may not be applicable to a lot of you. Now, even when we look at our large tier ones, you've just started becoming global. You have some, facilities in Europe, very few in China, and those of you who are in China are having major problems in China. I've not seen enough of a movement into Eastern Europe or into India. I have no doubt all of that will happen at the tier 1 level and also at the OEM level. If that many aircrafts are going to be sold in Asia, there's going to be a movement into Asia. And of course, the two big markets of China and India are going to have a big impact. So, some of you are looking like this, but many of you in the audience today are very simple 1 or 2 plants. So, maybe it doesn't extend. So the point we have to make here is that processes are not for one site. Processes link the enterprise. So these processes that link between corporate, the plant, the design center, and the sales, we call enterprise processes, for those of you who are part of an enterprise. So if you have read my book and looked at some of the other presentations I've made, I have said there are enterprise processes and site processes. Enterprise processes are global processes, whereas the site processes are standardized between sites, but we are much more focused on either the sales or the design center or the plant. All right. So Now, one part, very important part of designing a good management system is to have a good picture of your processes, sequence, and interaction, called a process map sometimes. And this process map then needs to be documented. Folks, you don't have to replace all your documentation, but the ones which you're doing new, try not to over-document. Have it as a 1, 2, 3-page process flow. And it has the who on the left-hand side with responsibility, the what in the flow, and the when in the flow, all right? The how is always a work instruction that you can have if you really need it. I won't go into when you would need it, but let's just stick to the level 1, the manual, and the level 2. As you know, in AS9100, a quality manual is not required, but a certain set of documents that they say could be collectively called the quality manual is still required. And, I am actually part of the TC176 defining the quality management systems documentation, ISO 10013. And let me just say, just because a standard doesn't require something, you can continue having a manual and then, of course, processes. I'm not going to have a chance today. There's so many different things I want to talk to you about, to continue on and talk to you about the pyramid of level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and what I think are best in class in everyone. Let me just summarize this topic and move on from our first strategy, that there should be only one quality manual. Addendums can be added to explain processes or process maps in locations and to show who is a process owner. Number 2, processes should be company-wide, that's the enterprise we talked about, and local site processes. Those of you who have just 2 or 3 plants, and one of the plants having the corporate, can just have standardized processes globally for all of them. Work instructions should be, so the idea of work instructions you need for your manufacturing processes, they should be reduced by looking at process/product families on the shop floor. So if you have the same process family or same machines in processes in multiple facilities, please have the same FMEA, control plan, work instructions, forms and checklists to standardize process control. Now, of course, forms should be in the hundreds and should be standardized globally. Moving on to our second topic, I feel remiss that I have not spent more time discussing this. This alignment of processes, strategy, and risk-based thinking that we call the business operating system at Omnex comes off methodology we wrote for Ford Motor Company in the 1990s. Then we continued training not only the OEM, but also training all the major suppliers to this day who have an operating system that top management takes the ownership of. So leadership then needs to really, really understand they own the management system. And the start of that is this process that we call the business operating system. I'll just tell you this, we updated the business operating system ever so slightly because the BOS was an incredible methodology. We went from customer focus to interested party focus, mission, vision, policies, which are always there, and the context, which was not explicit, but which is always there. And the whole idea is this planning in 6.1, which becomes the goals and objectives, is supported by KPIs, or as Ford called it, key measurables, supported by processes from your process map and process measurables, also required by AS9100. This, when we break it down, we call it alignment charts. This is a very important methodology and a very important understanding top management needs to have and we need to implement. The large tier ones, some of you may be in the audience, there are smaller tier ones that need it. The large tier ones are sophisticated enough to have this process in place, but even this process really needs to improve, because what we find is when we review the KPIs, top management often doesn't understand the linkage of the KPIs to continual improvement or to key processes. You know, it's not obvious. Sometimes I find, you know, even the closing the gap, meaning where you are and the goal you want to be, it doesn't happen magically. It happens because senior management plans it and assigns it throughout the organization. If you haven't gotten to that point, that is what we need to do. We just did a benchmarking visit to a best-in-class supplier of ours, and the remark was, how is his leadership coming in? How is the leadership really involved in what's going on? Folks, that comes from having them understand that they own the business operating system, which have the key clauses of AS9100. Again, who cares about clauses? We care about the process. This process is a leadership process and they own it. So a few more thoughts here into what we need to talk about. The challenges we talked about requires a culture that stays focused on the drivers of success, uses objective data to judge performance, where top management understands they drive continual improvement, and where they are engaging all employees in that effort. Key features of BOS: leadership and management commitment, organizational context and customer focus, risk-based thinking, process focus, and many more. I could continue, but what would happen is I've not allowed enough time to talk about BOS, but just to tell you, it's a vital process. I'll tell you the rest here that I wanted to focus on. Number one, it introduces the idea that results are cross-functional. Aha, what does that mean? It means PPM is not quality's job, it's a cross-functional job. Delivery is not the shipping department's job, it's a cross-functional job. I could tell you a couple of different stories to illuminate this idea of cross-functionality, but it's key to understand for the business operating system architecture that results are driven by processes. You know, you cannot drive results, you can drive processes. All right. That's how you get the process focus with champions understanding they champion at the very senior management level. The key enterprise processes are managed by these champions. Another thing BOS drives is the idea of visual management. A single way throughout the company to measure yourself and to where you are and your goal. Pareto diagrams to identify what to improve, and then the improvement is always based on what needs to drive the needle. So, which I didn't mention, so top management then has teams, cross-functional teams, we're working on cross-functional initiatives, and Kaizen teams working on the small improvements, or the small improvements and the breakthrough improvements. Of course, Kaizen is both. All right. So this idea of the management team, a cross-functional team of top management, you know, sometimes we call them a steering committee, sometimes we call them a leadership committee, who's looking at KPIs, who are taught that they need to meet monthly, that the meeting needs to be improvement-oriented. It's not the quality manager's job or somebody else's job to put together the KPI. The KPIs are brought together by champions who own the KPIs, including the closing the gap activities. The meeting is improvement oriented and is about removing roadblocks and closing the gap. So that was the second initiative I'm going to talk to you about today. The third one is for this low ppm driver, APQP and PPAP, that is well standardized in AS9145, and we're proud to say we played an important part in this AS9145 development. Of course, the IAQG and AAQG did that. And what are we trying to say here? This APQP and PPAP, along with the discipline problem solving, whether it's 8D or the EPS method that we like to, that ties in closer with the FEMA, they are your low ppm engine. Now, this APQP and PPAP tools, well, I'll talk to you. Let me not get ahead of myself. You need it for new product development, but you also need it in the shop floor for process control, something we call process review. So for one of the large tier ones, we are doing what we call FEMA workshops with suppliers. And it's really the, these tools can be used for new products or existing products. And the work on the existing products then come back to when you need to use it for new products. All right. So what are we talking about? A phase gate project. Many of you, by the way, are not design responsible. That's okay. You can start with phase 3. You need to have phase 1 planning, but you can start with the manufacturing process development and the product and process approval, which is phase 4. So phase gates, and then this APQP, FMEA, and PPAP, along with the MSA and the SPC, are important. Here's a picture of the APQP with the PPAP process in the very end from AS9145. The all-important FMEAs, which are linked, and the PPAP that comes from the different phases of APQP. Folks, again, many of you are just doing PPAP while forgetting APQP. And don't make the same mistakes that we took years to learn in other industries. Purchasing and quality cannot ask for the PPAP at the very end of the launch of the supplier. If you do it like that, it'll just become a paperwork affair. I did a best-in-class presentation for the AAQG maybe a year or two ago. Feel free to email us for a copy of this best-in-class APQP and PPAP. We did that before the AS9145 came out. And, talking about our experiences in the aerospace industry, of course, we're on the writing committees of many of these standards in the AIAG and automotive, and have had experience since the mid to late 80s implementing these. All right, this last process is actually a picture from Omnex that came from the late 1980s, and which is what we call, it's a FEMA-driven work process controls is what you need for standardization on the shop floor. Again, you got to do it by process families, and this exercise, folks, will save you lots of money. You don't need to do this for your customer. You're doing this for yourself to really drive down the ppm levels. I guarantee you, Omnex guarantees you, just doing this process flow FEMA control plan and the FEMA-driven control plan and the standardization will bring down rejects substantially if you take historical information into your FMEA. Enough said. For your larger tier ones and your system suppliers, you need to, of course, have flow down and the linkage between system FMEA, subsystem FMEA, and the component DFMEA. And linked with that is the test plan, and also from there you need to populate the process flow PFMEA control plan. Out of that is derived, of course, your PPAP. Folks, big ideas. This is what I'll offer you in this webinar. Each of these could be a webinar of its own. I'll be happy to talk more about this for each of your individual organizations. And then, folks, don't forget your, actually, we should be talking about the 8D, updating the FMEA, right? Going from after the 8D is done, you need to go back into the FMEA that you see there on the bottom. And this should be whether it is supplier issues, whether it is internal issues or external issues. This FMEA is your lessons learned for your next implementation. All right, let's understand another key concept. I don't know if you have seen this picture. There's a lot we could talk to you about this picture. This was a picture that actually came from when the APQP, which is called Advanced Quality Planning in the beginning, was first launched. In fact, you see this dotted line here at the very top. That versus the two peaks was what we were trying to combat when advanced quality planning first came. The idea is severe failure right before launch and big failures after launch that, you know, yes, the product was designed at a very low budget where you broke your budget just as you launched because you spent another 2 or 3 times the money in failures, rework and scrap and new machines and things like that. So advanced quality planning, or APQP, came into being that you spend more money and time up front. Don't forget that. You have to borrow from your budget that's later and slate it for, you know, in the planning phases of APQP. Next, this is what we have learned in the last 20 to 25 years of implementation of APQP, FMEAs, control plans, and so on, that the cost of advanced quality planning, the dotted line, can come down. Do you see those curves? How does it come down? By design and process reuse using a family of parts and processes approach. Of course, the only way to do this effectively and to really use this tool effectively is with software. So, okay. Before I go on to my last slide, this is a slide set that one of our consultants who does a lot of work in the aerospace industry, Dave Watkins, put together for an internal Omnex meeting. This is what he said is happening today in the aerospace industry on the left-hand side in terms of the dependence is not on FMEA, but on layers of test and inspection. You know, reliance on qualification testing at end of long design cycles. First article that only looks at a dimensional report. Purchasing focused on low cost. Purchasing and quality being separated when dealing with suppliers, which means when one tries to do an initiative, it's not supported by the purchasing decision. Punitive, reactive supplier management, and then lastly, which is not on here, which we very well know, multiple big, large customer departments all making demands of the supplier, often which may be in conflict with each other. And so the industry then moves to the right, needs to move to the right-hand side with the risk analysis and the prevention coming from FEMA and process control, adopting preventive design processes early, implementing AS9100D with the APQP and PPAP. But folks, the devil is in the details. So if you want to really get the benefit of AS9100D, you need to understand what you really need to do when you implement that. Developing supply chain management systems and processes and focusing on supplier development and supplier performance. And as I mentioned to you, good suppliers then, need to first understand why they're doing it. There's a whole mentality of I'm doing it only if it's in the purchase order in the aerospace industry. And really, to a large degree, other industries have overcome that. The aerospace industry also needs to understand these initiatives that I'm talking to you about, these 8 strategies, it's not for your customer, it's for your survival. So, in summary of this AS9100, 9145 APQP and PPAP or PPAP, these processes are almost impossible to conduct via spreadsheets. You need to have electronic e-processes that help you provide the linkages we showed you in the picture and to institutionalize the system. Along with software systems that needs to, which means web-based enabled e-processes, there needs to be training, not just for the engineering community, but top management to understand they are implementing a key strategy for the organization. Engineering, purchasing, quality. And let me tell you this, these methods will drive quality in the organization. Again, you need a good management system. You need to have BOS implemented because you've got to get your leadership in a culture change. Third is AS9145 and 8D. That's where we are in terms of what we're talking to you about. These systems are guaranteed to drive a low PPM inside your organization. Folks, I put this in to tell you AS9145 does not pull in all the required standards that you need to have. One of them, looking at the connected, airplane, is the AS9115. I've lately joined this committee in the AAQG, and some rules in terms of our AS9115, our thoughts are, if you have aerospace, your registrar should insist on AS9115. It needs to be in the scope of your audit, and you need to be audited to AS9115. Right now, it's a little vague. It's not required. And I know the aerospace industry, and since I've been participating in the AS9100 writing committee for the AAQG, I can tell you this, that the aerospace industry as a industry are very loath to require anything. But folks, it should be part of maybe the customer purchase order, because that seems to be the way requirements get driven in the aerospace industry. Bottom line, AS9115 is a must-have if you have software. And of course, you will all have software, and you already probably have software because that's required to where you're trying to go. So let's look at this. This is a matrix. It excluded 9145 because 9145 came out after AS9100. Here are what we think you need to integrate into your AS9100 implementation. And folks, all these other ones are also good, but these you should not miss. Right? You need to integrate that into your AS9100. That's all I really have a chance to talk to you about in this 1-hour webinar in terms of the integration of these standards. Let's move on to the next topic. Operational performance excellence. This is the Omnex methodology for operational excellence, includes Lean Six Sigma, removing waste, optimize targets, reducing variation. Now, we've had a lot of experience not only helping organizations, large organizations get to parts per billion. This is where our customers are today. Whole industries are making big improvements, and we did it without Six Sigma. I think Six Sigma is very important, but it need not be the strategy of today. You have lower hanging fruits that just the disciplined problem solving will fix, and there's only so much you can do. Implement lean. You need to have lean implemented because you absolutely need to lean out your organization. Plus, as you know, and we know, these are some important standards for your customers on top of it. But I'm putting it in because it's important to your survival. All right, to go with lean, how does lean enforce discipline? Basically, in the end of the day, when we pull out inventory, we're also guaranteeing these things, this hidden things under the iceberg. All these problems that we have are being solved. That's what lean does. This premium freight, long lead times, late deliveries, when they improve, you're also getting rid of all these things underneath that you cannot see from the surface of the water. And increase in inventory means more issues in the organization. Reduction of inventory really means we are getting rid of these problems. And, you know, this was always something that really intrigued me, and maybe you all have seen these. When you look at the time, so speed of how long parts stay in our plant should be one of our key measurables. Well, one of our measurables for lean. Let me not say key measurables. We cannot have more than about 12 to 18 different key metrics, and will just overwhelm what top management needs to look at. And maybe this does percolate up to a top management key measurable, how long things take inside our plant, how much of it is being value added, meaning actually being transformed, the product being transformed, other than non-value added, where it's waiting for a machine, inspected, transported, setup time, and so on. So 95% non-value added is typical. So really then, what we have to be spending time on is getting rid of all this waste. And again, we shall continue because we could spend hours on each of these topics. Something we believe deeply in, that we have been implementing since the 1980s, disciplined problem solving. Here you see the 8D process. Of course, we don't care what process you implement. They all have defined the problem, containment, root cause, and of course root cause needs to be 3 different types of root cause: escape, occur, system, and then corrective action and preventive action. Recently, we were part of a cross-functional, industry-led team updating the 8D into effective problem solving, linking the FMEA very closely with the problem solving very closely with FMEA. Folks, so I leave some time for questions. Let me pause here, giving you a chance to ask questions you may have. Thank you for the comment on the lost audio. I was actually mentioning that I'm going to resume the webinar, but I had muted myself. So I see questions coming, so I'm just waiting as I see all the questions come. When I see it sort of slow down, I will continue with the webinar. So I have covered 6 different strategies as we speak. Miles, I would very much appreciate a printout of these questions. All right, folks, why don't we continue? Here are 2 very important systems you need to implement, but I don't have time to cover. Number 1 is the requirement for integrated management systems. The very top one, integrating AS9100 with AS9145, AS9115, and the important key AS9100 standards, along with other standards, I was reminded the other day, is very important. That you have to do today. These other ones can wait. Good organizations that are going to survive and thrive into the future. And those of you who are 50 people, I've visited many with 50 to 75. That is okay. We have seen the 50 to 75 person companies explode and grow. It's because of your capability, your leadership's capability of really transforming your organization, understanding the industry needs. So what I have for you is what I saw as the industry need. So integrate the AS9100 series. And second is, you need to implement electronic web-based processes. Your single most important one, 2, will be documentation and then new product development. And the new product development really is about DFMEA, DBPNR, process flow FEMA control plan. Many of you only do manufacturing, so it can be the process flow FEMA control plan, either by product families or process families. Those 2 e-processes are absolutely important for you to implement. So with that, what I'll do is summarize the webinar and then take the dozen or so questions you have asked me. So here's the summary here. When implementing the QMS, that's why I started with you. The QMS is all about how do you achieve your objectives. You know, should focus on best-in-class implementation. Forget meeting the standard or getting registered. That is secondary, folks. If you focus on becoming a great company, your registration is guaranteed. All right. Anyway, have that mentality of why you're doing what you're doing. Communicate that internally. Make sure your top management understands that. And the 8 strategies we talked about, the idea of having a wonderful process definition with few documents. Don't be overburdened by documents. Number 2, disciplined management of the organization using the business operating system, getting leadership to understand they drive the operating system. APQP and PPAP, part of your low PPM strategy. AS9100D and the integration of standards, because 2 reasons, the connected aerospace and the requirements that you're already following. They should not be separate. Integrate them. Number 5, lean. Lean is extremely important. You have to do waves of lean. This is what we have found. If you have done it once, you have to do it again, and you got to do it again because waste creeps in as time goes on. Not only because of products and processes, because of by personnel changes. And sometimes we don't have enough of a good lean culture to have things be maintained. And remember this idea of, you saw that right from the book on Kaizen, that once you make an improvement, there's backsliding. Happens in lean. Number 6, disciplined problem solving. So these 6 are must-haves. Integrated management systems with AS91, number 4, and then web-based processes for documentation and for APQP and PPAP. What will you get out of this? What you'll get out of this is tremendous cost savings, increased quality, that you'll go from percent rejects. As you know, the chart says most of us are 3 sigma, and 3 sigma means 20% of your profit goes into this defects and rework. And so the PPM goes down, you save a lot of money. And of course, you have to be on time. This is what the industry requires, and it's great savings. All right, a couple of different things for you to know. A book on ISO 9001 2015, classes that we have, integrated management systems, aerospace courses. I'm trying to go through these quickly so I can get to your questions. Upcoming training, as you know, we do training in Huntsville, Seattle, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, our world headquarters, San Jose, Huntsville, Alabama, and Seattle. And we have a sister company that focuses on software, on the e-processes we talked to you about. Well, I'll just mention it to you. What I've talked to you about because we firmly believe this is the way to go for the industry. Now, let me take on a few of the questions that were asked. Does Omnex have any more content on business operating systems? You know, I'll be happy to send you. You know, this business operating system is something we wrote for Ford Motor Company. It's near and dear. I was a team leader on developing this, so very near and dear to my heart. Yeah, we have, you know, lots of, you know, email us. I'll send you something that we have that we can give to you free. We also have, what do we have? We have an executive overview for this. We also have a 2-day training class for the facilitator who's going to facilitate it. We have a 10-day implementation process. We even have software to help you implement this. All right. Can you elaborate more on the benefits of software for managing APQP and PPAP, NPI, new product improvement? Folks, let me just tell you, it's really impossible to do the linkages you need from DFMEA to DBPNR, defining in your DFMEA the KPCs and the KCs and the critical characteristics, and having that populate the process flow, and the process flow linking with the PFMEA to the control plan to the work instructions. The reason, and I'll go back to the 1980s, first when we implemented this, we implemented these methodologies in the 1980s, okay? So maybe it's 1986, 1987, I cannot remember exactly. Implementing it with, Excel, it was really not Excel. We did a Quattro Pro that I can tell you that was a better package than Excel at that time. So we implemented it with Quattro Pro, if you all remember that. And very soon found out you cannot keep these linkages in place in just one product line. And then, of course, if a system has subsystems and things flow down, all of that system to components and in part families that you need to do, you have to have software. And this software will save you hours and hours and hours of work because of design reuse and process reuse. Please do contact the right people at Omnex, and we'll fill you in on that. does functional safety apply to aerospace? The aerospace industry already has functional safety methodologies. And this is something, you know, ISO 26262, which is in the automotive, I have not done enough of my homework to see, you know, how far do the existing AS safety processes go, whether, you know, they need to be tweaked. And if I can tell you, something like ISO 26262 is an absolute need in the aerospace industry. How do you promote top management engagement? Folks, without a doubt, number one, the implementers need to understand a management system is there only to help your company achieve objectives. That has to be communicated to your top management. That's number one. Number two, a big part of your management system is that business operating system. Your top management needs to understand that the results are dependent on processes, process measurables, and initiatives to close the gap. So between the two, you can really engage your top management and have them understand the continual improvement is driven from their business review meetings and them asking the right questions. That is part of how you are going to drive this leadership involvement. There are more questions that you've asked since then. Let me get back to it. Miles, can you print out, while I take a few more questions I have, can you print out the new questions that just came in? What is risk-based thinking? Very good question. You'll see that I purposely did not dwell on the standard. Risk-based thinking in aerospace comes in, of course, in operational risk. This operational risk is what was there earlier in the last AS9100C, and it's there now in 8.1 in AS9100. And that's what you get by implementing APQP and PPAP. So operational risk you have, but the planning risk, that's in 6.1, we don't have. Project risk, you don't have. All of these need to be added in. Hang on one second, folks. Just need to know myself how to see these questions. Hang on one second, folks, as I learn this thing myself. All right, I'm just going to let it go. Next question we have is, okay, just can you email me this presentation? Oh, the BIC of APQP PPAP. I'll say, Miles, I think you are well aware. I think it was I put a lot of time and effort into it because it was done for the AQG meeting as a best-in-class presentation. I'll be happy to share this APQP PPAP, and I think we have your name, sir. We will make sure we get that to you. With that, I think this is the time we have allocated for questions. Thank you very much for all your patience, and I hope this was a good webinar for you, and hope to see you at this and other webinars. Please use Omnex as you need for either software, for training, or for implementations, or for auditing. Folks, thank you very much. Have a great day, and we'll be seeing you in other webinars. Bye-bye now.